You live with someone who can't throw things away, or you grew up with someone like that. And at some point, maybe right now, you've stood in that room, surrounded by stacks, piles, things that haven't been touched in years. And you've asked yourself, why can't they just let go? Maybe you've tried to help, tried to organize it, tried to throw things out while they weren't looking, and then they found out, and the reaction wasn't anger. It was something closer to panic, like you'd taken something that belonged to them in a way you didn't understand. Psychology reveals what's actually happening, and by the end of this, you'll stop blaming them for something they can't control. People who hoard are not lazy, they're not dirty, they're not confused about what garbage is. Watch them closely. They know exactly what they have. They can tell you where almost everything is. They remember the story of that magazine from 2008, the broken lamp they've kept for 3 years. But here's what happens when they try to throw something away. Researchers put people who hoard in an MRI scanner, and they watched what happened in their brain when they held something they couldn't use anymore. The part of their brain that processes actual pain, it lights up the same way, not metaphorically, actually. A plastic cup they haven't used since 2010 triggers the same neural response as real loss. So when you see someone unable to throw things away, you're not watching laziness. You're watching someone experiencing measurable, real pain at the thought of letting go. To their brain, letting go doesn't feel neutral. It feels dangerous, but there's something deeper underneath the pain. The objects aren't objects to them. That old magazine isn't a magazine. It's a memory that they're terrified of losing. That broken lamp isn't trash. It's proof that they once had something. These are anchors. Proof that a moment happened, that a person mattered, that they were alive during that time. And often, there's grief underneath. Many people who hoard have experienced real loss. A death, a divorce, a failure they couldn't prevent. And at some point, maybe without even realizing it, they made a decision. If I keep this object, I keep the memory. If I keep the memory, I keep the person. If I keep the person, they're not really gone. The hoarding isn't about the objects. It's a refusal to accept that things end. Sometimes, when someone hoards, they're not holding on to things. They're holding on to people who aren't there anymore. Now, not all hoarding comes from loss. Sometimes it's a problem with how the brain processes decisions. ADHD, autism, difficulty organizing. The object stays not because it carries a memory, but because letting go feels impossible. Different reason. Same result from the outside. But the majority of cases, the ones that hurt families, they come from grief. Here's what makes it worse. The hoarding starts as protection, but it creates the opposite of what they need. Once the piles grow, they can't invite anyone over. They hide. They become ashamed of the very thing that's supposed to comfort them. And shame makes you isolated. And isolation makes you need the objects more. Because objects don't judge. Objects don't leave. Objects remember. Becomes a closed loop. The person hoards because they're lonely. They become more lonely because they hoard. And the hoarding intensifies. The very thing protecting them from loneliness becomes the reason they disappear inside it. If you live with someone who hoards, you're in a specific kind of pain. You've probably tried everything. You've suggested throwing things away. You've offered to help organize. Maybe you've even thrown things away without telling them, and it didn't work. In fact, it made it worse. From their perspective, you didn't help. You took something that mattered. That was an act of loss, not assistance. So you're stuck in a helpless position. You can't fix it. You can't make them see reason. The mess keeps growing. And you start to wonder, is this my fault? Did I cause this? Am I selfish for being angry? You're not. Your frustration is valid. Your anger is real. You have a right to live in a space where you can breathe. But here's what's important to understand. The person doing this isn't doing it to you. They're doing it despite you, despite loving you, despite knowing it's hurting you, despite wanting things to be different. The need to hold on, to keep, to preserve, to refuse loss is stronger than the need to be okay, stronger than the relationship, stronger than their own comfort. That's not an excuse. It's the reality of what's happening. If you're living with someone who hoards, here are the things that matter. First, stop trying to fix it yourself. Forced cleanings don't work. Research shows they make things worse. The person feels violated. The anxiety spikes, and they rebuild faster. The urge to help is understandable, but it doesn't help. Second, understand the difference between love and responsibility. You can love this person and still not be able to save them. You can care deeply and still set boundaries. You can understand why they're doing this and still refuse to live in it. Those things aren't contradictions, they're survival. Third, they need professional help. Not you, someone trained in therapy. Someone who understands not just the behavior, but the grief underneath it. Someone who can help them learn that letting go of an object doesn't mean letting go of what it represents. That's possible, but it's not something a family member can do alone. Fourth, you are not responsible for their choices. If they refuse help, that's their choice. If they get worse, that's not your failure. You didn't cause this. You can't fix this. You're not supposed to. What you can do is protect yourself. Set boundaries. Say no. Live your life even if theirs is chaos. That's not cruel, that's survival. So next time you see the piles, next time you feel the frustration creeping in, remember, that person isn't choosing discomfort. They're choosing what feels like survival. The objects aren't trash to them. They're proof that something mattered. And the inability to let go isn't weakness or laziness. It's an inability to accept that loss is real, and that sometimes things end, and that sometimes people go away, and we can't stop it. Understanding that doesn't solve the problem, but it stops you from hating them for something they can't control. And sometimes, that's where change begins. If this resonated, if you live with this, or you are this, subscribe, because on this channel, we don't just see what people do, we see why they do it.